So for this week, I'm going to show you how I replace this toilet right here. You can use it if you're setting a new one. I had to replace the floor actually down here, which is part of my series. And I was redoing this whole bathroom. So again, you can do this if you're putting a new floor in, or if you're just taking out the old toilet and putting a new one. The process is the same. Obviously, you have to take out the old one and then clean it up. So the overall steps is I'm going to cut the water off from the toilet, the supply line, and then try to get it out of the bowl, out of the tank as much as possible so you're not making a big mess. And then you want to clean off where the toilet seals to the floor or the ring on there, and then put a new gasket on there, reset it, make sure everything's sealed. There's a couple places to avoid, to look at for leaking. Obviously the water coming in, water coming out of the tank, water as it's going down the drain, not sealing correctly. So I'm going to go through all the steps of that and show you. And again, I'm actually replacing the floor, so there's a little bit of intricacy of there because I'm changing the level of the floor, and so I have to do add a riser on there. So I'll try to put some of the tools or some of the things in the links in the description. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, is turn off the water. Mine's just a quarter turn. You're maybe a little bit more. Just make sure there's no water. Flush it. Just make sure it's everything's out of the tank as much as you can. I've taken most of it out here. And then I usually like to just pull up the flapper a little bit and kind of get as much as I can down the drain, and then dry it out as much as possible with a towel or something like that. Just get as much water out of it as possible, so when you take it off, it's not dripping everywhere. There's just 2 screws in the bottom, and that's what removes the tank from the bowl. And then the bowl, I like to use just a plunger, just kind of plunge the water, kind of push it as much as I can down the bowl, down the drain, just pull it out a little bit, make sure there's none in there in the plunger. And then similar thing, there's 2 screws on the side of the toilet. You just take those off. They might be covered by a little plastic cap. Once you get all that off, you can pull the bowl and everything directly off. I'm going to be replacing the floor here, so it's again a little bit different. I like to use a plastic bag, just put it in there, the bowl in there, and the tank is a little bit easier to take off, just so I'm not spreading water, because usually there's not a lot of room to work in, so I have to take it out. So first thing you want to do is clean off this mess here. You should have gloves on. I forgot to put gloves on here, but I sprayed it with alcohol and kind of sanitized the whole area because, obviously this is the drain for the toilet and everything's going down. So you want all this wax, everything cleaned off as best as you can, because you're going to be putting a new wax ring on there. And then clean the floor, clean everywhere around there, just so you're not, setting. Again, you can check my playlist here. I'm replacing the floor. If you're just replacing the tank or toilet or putting a new one in there, you don't have to do all this. But essentially, you might have to do some because you're taking off the old one, so you want to clean off. You can see how much cleaner it is here, and then skip ahead. I've replaced the floor here, but you can see one of the problem is there's since it's higher now, there's a little bit of lip, so I'm putting this new riser on there that's going to raise it up close to the floor. Some people like to put it, higher than the floor. I don't mind if it's pretty close or a little bit under. I just use a little bit thicker ring on there. One thing, just not really to this, but if you put in a new floor, make sure you don't put it so tight that the screw doesn't fit in. That was something I had to deal with, but that's another story. So you want this to be... You'll be able to put the gasket on there. Those screws need to come up. I'm using new screws. You can see they're a lot longer. They usually come with the kit. So here I'm going to put on that new riser, and you see I've cleaned it all the way down as best as I could because I want to have a nice seal for this. I'm using silicone. It's actually siliconized caulk, but it's you just want something to seal. The water as it drains down should not ever be coming here. Because of the seal, but if there's ever a clog or anything, you might get a back pressure that pushes its way back up and could come in between those 2 risers. So that's why I'm just sealing it. Again, I'm just putting enough where it spreads there, and I'm going to just for a little extra put it along the gap right there as well, so that it seals perfectly. And then just push it down there. You don't have to push it real hard. Push it around. You want it to make a nice seal. I think I left it overnight just to actually harden. So I have perfect seal there. But again, make sure these the screws everything's lined up correctly here. I should have probably maybe put those other screws on the top, but this this works fine. So I'm using a wax ring here. There's a couple different kinds you can. You can see this one's extra thick. I get that just because my riser is sitting just a little bit below the level of the floor. So if you're sitting up, you don't need that extra wax. But again, just put it on there. You don't want to press it down now. You just want it lined up. You maybe turn it a little bit so it doesn't slide around at all. And then bring the bowl back in. You can see the screws are lined up where I want them to. It doesn't really matter at this point. There's plenty of room for them to move. But I like to have it just correct. And I actually cleaned off the bottom of the bowl as well so I could get a nice seal here. And when you sit it down, you don't want to press it hard yet. You want to get it lined up. You don't want to actually set it into the wax yet. If you can see, it's kind of rocking back and forth. It's actually sitting on that wax. And so I'm going to try to set it a little bit. Just press that wax down just enough that I can get it so it's not tipping around. And I like to make sure it's square to the wall, just measuring the back of the bowl to the wall, and just so it's square before I finally set it. And again, I'm not going to press it down really hard or rock it back too much because I want the wax to be nice, have a nice seal against it. So I'm getting it straight and then rock it just a little bit. If your floor is uneven, you might have to put a little spacer or something in there so that it doesn't rock, because if it's ever rocking, it can eventually break down that wax and create a leak. So once I've got it set here, get the screws put in the middle. You can see it's square to the wall. All that needs to be cleaned off as well on the top there. You can see the screw comes through. This is what it originally took off. I'm just going to put that spacer down. That's what actually holds the cap that was taken off. And then there's usually one of these little things that holds the screw in place to keep it from going, moving up and down. And it's very important to have don't ever put the metal washers directly onto the porcelain, because as you tighten it down, or you could tighten it too much and crack the porcelain. Or if you tried to screw a nut directly onto the porcelain, you can definitely crack it. So you want to spread out that pressure. It's going to hold it down, but you never want to torque it really, really tight. It's just enough so that the bowl stays in place without rocking back and forth. So you can see I'm tightening it down. Later on, I'll tighten it with a wrench. But once I got that all set, I'm going to put the tank on, and you want to replace this. It's a couple bucks. You'll save some time if there's ever a leak or anything. Just replace all these washers, anything that's that can break down over time. So this just goes back on. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3 screws. It all pretty much acts the same. You want to get it in there, get that washer, make sure it's set correctly. And that hole is different, can be different on different ones. So make sure you got the right size where it's it's lined up correctly. And then it's going to be the same thing on the inside. There's some rubber washers. I would replace those as well. Usually when you get a kit, it's all replace. Or if it's a brand new one, they'll already come new, because those can leak as well. So there's going to be a rubber washer on the top with the screw. It goes through, and then there's going to be you want to put a rubber washer on the bottom as well. So again, you're going to spread out that torque that you're putting down when you're screwing in the nut. And then there's a metal washer you'll see on top here. So again, that screw is going to press onto the metal washer, and then that'll push onto the rubber washer and disperse that torque, so you don't end up cracking the tank. Same thing, you want to tighten it enough that things aren't moving around, but not over tighten it where you actually crack it. So once that's all done, you can put the valve back in there, get it all set. I had an issue here because I raised the floor and my existing supply line no longer reached, which may or may not be a problem for you, but something to remember. Had to head back to the store, get one that was a little bit longer, but solved that pretty easy. And then once I hook that up, then I'm going to turn on the water, make sure there's no leaks coming in, just like you normally do with a valve. If you've ever replaced one of those, same thing. That should be sealed correctly. And then anywhere where there's a hole in the tank, like where the nuts come through, you want to make sure that's not leaking. Where the tank meets the bowl, that's not leaking. You want to flush it a couple times, make sure it's not coming out from underneath the bowl, out from the top. You can see I'm kind of looking around here, looking at the bottom, making sure there's no leaks. So that's it for replacing the tank and the bowl. Now I had to use these long screws just because they're adjustable, but you actually have to cut them off so they don't break off or anything. They might make some, but these are usually what you get. So get a metal saw. I couldn't find, you could use an electric one. I just didn't want to like vibrate it like crazy here. I couldn't find my handle, so I had to do this by hand, which is, I wouldn't recommend. It took like 5 or 10 minutes, I think it was. It wasn't great, but you just want to cut it enough where you have enough room, in case you need to replace the nut or anything or take it off, but just enough. You can see I finally get through here, enough where you can get that cap on and it sets down. And once you do that, you're pretty much done. You can see I have a little gap there. I went back and sealed that with some caulk. But that's the major steps of replacing a toilet.